Welcome to Momentous. I am Pastor Rebecca Great, the pastor mission developer for Momentous and the host for our weekly podcast. At Momentous, we believe that God is present with us in each and every single one of our moments. We believe that our stories are connected to God's story and to one another's stories. We believe that this connection and relationship changes our lives and our entire world. Now, before we begin, I invite you to take a deep breath in, to hold it while you count to 3, and then slowly release that breath. For this summer, we are spending our entire time at Sabbath Stops, at times designed for sacred rest, to reconnect with God and with those around us and with creation. Summer is a season where almost all of our schedules completely shift from what they are during the school year. Now, as many of us travel over the next few months, we are going to intentionally stop, just like we would at a rest stop on the road. So grab a snack, grab some water to drink, stretch, and take another deep breath. Now, I come from a long line of band geeks. My parents were both in band. My cousins were all in band. Some of my brothers were in band, and most of my nieces and nephews were in band, and the ones who are still too young for it will most certainly be when they get there. Almost my entire middle school and high school life revolved around band, or practicing, or going to a band competition, or an honor band weekend, or hanging out with my friends from band. It was all band all the time. Now, I don't remember all of the songs we played, but there are a few that stick out, either because of how beautiful the piece was or how much more interesting the song became when we learned the history of what the composer had experienced that inspired that particular arrangement of the song. Now, we played a lot of music by Percy Grainger during my high school years. And one of the songs we played was titled The Immovable Doe. Now, the melody for this song is charming, and it's very easy for it to get stuck in your head, and you can hum along with it. And then the harmonies just kind of follow along right beside it. Now, the story about the song goes that before writing the song, Grainger had purchased a harmonium, which is another type of musical instrument, and the harmonium either already had or developed something called a cipher, a note that continuously rings without any discernible cause or reason for it to ring. There was nothing he could do to make that note stop. It just resonated the entire time. So he used that idea to write a song titled The Immovable Doe. And if you'd like to listen to it, I've linked a recording of it in the transcript for this episode. So while you're listening to this song, there is this constant high-pitched tone that resonates for the literal entire song. It never lets up, but it's passed around the band as various instruments share the burden of holding a constant high note on pitch for 4.5 minutes. Now, this song is called The Immovable Doe because the song was written that the cipher, that constant note that resonates throughout the song, is the first note of the scale or the key that the song is written in. Now, if you've ever seen The Sound of Music, where Maria is teaching the Von Trapp children how to sing, she's using this idea where you go through an entire scale using various syllables. Do is always the first note of the scale, then re, then mi, then fa, sol, la, ti, and then you're back at do because the scale has restarted. Now, I promise you don't have to remember all of these in order to understand where we're going. I promise. Now, when people are learning music, there are usually two different schools of thought for how to teach what each note sounds like and what the intervals between them sound like. There is the immovable do system, where C, the note C, is always do, and a D is always re, and an E is always mi, and all up and down the scale as you go. But there's also another system called the movable do system, where the specific note assigned to each syllable will change based on the key or the number of sharps and flats that are assigned to the melody. So in the movable do system, if a song is written in the key of C with no sharps and no flats, then the first note of the scale, the do, would be a C. But if a song is written in the key of F, where it has one flat, the first note of the scale, the do, would not be C. It would be an F. Now, both ways of learning music like this are helpful in various settings because they both teach something about music and how to hear the intervals between different notes. The immovable do system, the one where do is always C and re is always D and mi is always E and on and on and on, that is particularly helpful for people who are playing several different instruments all in a group setting. By saying everyone needs to play the same pitch might mean that each instrument is technically playing a different note, since different instruments are built to play in different keys. And having some agreement about where we are all supposed to be landing together is helpful. It helps them unite around a common goal and helps them work together. Now, if you are using the movable do system, the one where the do changes what actual note it is referring to depending on the key for the melody, this is particularly helpful for beginning musicians as they are learning how to identify the intervals between all of the different notes and how that sounds different when the key of a song changes. It also helps instrumentalists and singers be able to transpose songs to be in a range that fits their instrument or their vocal range better. So as an alto, I am incredibly grateful when something is transposed down, when the do is moved to a lower place, because then it doesn't hurt my voice when I have to sing the new high notes in the melody. The movable do system is incredibly helpful for individuals as they are learning and practicing on their own before they come together with a larger group. It helps them learn and solidify the basics of the melody so that it can come together with a larger group where the music is made, as they all learn how to balance one another and add dynamics and then play with the tempo. So what in the world does this have to do with Sabbath? Now, I know we looked at this very, very briefly a few weeks ago, but it deserves another visit, especially as we learned 5 different ways to live in Sabbath moments during last week's podcast. Now, if you still need to listen to last week's podcast, you can either pause this podcast and go listen to it and then come back, or you can listen to it right after you finish this episode. It is a helpful listen, but it's not a necessary one to understand this week's episode. Now, I know we have musicians listening along, and I also know that some of you have very passionate opinions on whether the immovable or movable dough system is superior. But from my semi-amateur musician seat, I think they both have a place. And I wonder if the same can be true for a Sabbath practice. Can both an immovable Sabbath and a movable Sabbath have a valid place in our lives and in our world? Now, for me and for many Christians, I believe the answer is yes. For those of other faith traditions, I believe the answer is no. And I think both answers are okay. We don't have to strive for an argument that will declare one of us right and one of us wrong. There are times and places for that kind of dichotomous thinking, but I don't think this is the place for it. And I don't think there are as many places for that kind of thinking as some may want to believe. I think there are far more places for nuances in belief and practice than stark yes or no, in or out, us or them kinds of thinking. Now, I know there are faith practices that state the Sabbath is Friday evening at sundown to Saturday evening at sundown, period. And this is when the entire rhythm of their lives change and they focus on rest and reconnecting with God and with one another and with creation. And I think that that is an absolutely wonderful and valid way to incorporate Sabbath in their lives. And I do have questions about what happens when members of that faith community must engage in something that requires breaking the Sabbath. Like they must go to work, or they must care for someone else's health needs, or they must not refrain from eating or drinking because of their health concerns. And I'm curious how this changes their Sabbath practice or their ability to connect to their faith. So if you know how to answer those questions, please send me an email and let me know. I know that many Christians will claim Sundays as a Sabbath day. And that usually means worship of some kind in the morning and maybe a special meal afterwards, but then quickly falls into cramming every undone task into a few hours time window before Monday morning comes. And that just means Sabbath has turned into marking off our checklist, which feels very productive, but how is that deepening our faith life and our connection with God and one another and creation? I had a conversation with my doctor a few years ago because he was very concerned about how busy I always said I was. Because serving as a pastor often means long and odd working hours, because we have all of the day-to-day ministry and business to attend to, but committee meetings and congregation and youth events need to happen outside of regular office or regular working hours so that members of the congregation can actually be a part of the congregation's ministries. So I gave him all these reasons about why finding downtime was so hard. And he looked at me and he said, "All right, Pastor, if you can't find downtime, where's your Sabbath? You know this isn't sustainable." And so we worked through figuring out how to incorporate actual rest in my schedule because, as he said, running errands isn't a Sabbath. That is work that keeps your day-to-day life going. Move your Sabbath around each week and then guard it. A movable Sabbath. So that freed me from thinking that Saturdays were my Sabbath. And if there was something scheduled for work, then I was just out of luck for that week or that stretch of weeks that seemed like it would go on for months. And it gave me the permission to take time throughout the week to rest. Now, I still need reminders to do this, but it has been liberating to remember that Sabbath and rest does not, for me, have to be an entire full day, and it doesn't have to be the exact same day each week. And if something gets scheduled, then I'm out of luck. Because the entire point is to spend time in Sabbath to reconnect with God and with one another and with creation. Not to run yourself until you are completely exhausted, and not to shame yourself because you have emergencies or an immovable work schedule that takes the time that other people must be spent in Sabbath. Sabbath is not about shame and guilt and disconnection. It is about rest and delight and reconnection. So friends, if you haven't done it yet, move your Sabbath around to a time in your schedule where it means you can actually observe it. It might stay on the same day it currently is, and it also might move to like a random Tuesday morning when everyone else you are in charge of caring for has something else planned. It is okay to not fill that time with finishing tasks. It is okay to fill that space with Sabbath and sacred rest. I'm going to invite you now to take another few deep breaths to center yourself in prayer. A prayer for the permission to be flexible. Unchanging and ever constant God. We know it is good news that Sabbath was built in from the very beginning of creation. Such good news that you didn't even say it was good like you did with everything else. You jumped ahead to declaring it holy, set apart. We know it is good news that you reminded our ancestors that they were to honor Sabbath through so many commandments and rules in the Old Testament. And we also know that your very being is about relationship. That's how you exist, and that's how you exist with us. Help us break free from the shame of not Sabbathing often enough or in the right way, and focus on the delight of connecting with you and everything you have made. Remind us that you are not a God of shame and separation, but a God of love and relationship. Amen. Thank you for joining us for our weekly Moment to Us. We are looking forward to growing with each of you and are so grateful you are a part of the momentous community. Thank you to our mission partners, the Southern Ohio Synod and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Their financial contributions and prayer have been instrumental in bringing this new ministry into existence. Now, we do have one more thank you for this week, and that is to Gethsemane Lutheran Church in Columbus, Ohio. They have called me to preach and lead worship with them this morning, and I will be spending time with their adult Sunday school class after worship. They will be live streaming their 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time worship service this morning on their YouTube channel. And I have direct linked their channel in the transcript for this episode located on our website. Inviting me to supply preach or to lead an education event or a retreat or just to be present with you for worship and to answer questions are additional ways that congregations and ministries can partner with Momentous. This past week, we celebrated the 3-month anniversary of Momentous and dropped our first quarterly newsletter. In there, we shared a bit about how Momentous has started and shared some of the highlights of the past few months and some beginning quotes from members of our community who have found a spiritual home here with us already. There are also some sneak peeks of things coming up this fall and some book recommendations from me based on some reading I've done to help with preparing our Sabbath Stop podcasts. Now, we did share the newsletter on our socials, but it's also linked at the bottom of our website front page and in the transcript of this episode if you haven't had a chance to read through it yet. Now, make sure to check out our social media this week because we are going to be asking you to let us know how you have found moments for Sabbath, either this week or this summer or at some point in the past. And we'll share these ideas on an upcoming podcast, hoping that sharing together will help us each notice some new opportunities for experiencing Sabbath in small or large portions of time, in movable or immovable times during our weeks. And if you are one of our community members who doesn't use social media, you can always send us an email at dailymomentous@gmail.com to let us know too. However you are engaging with or discerning partnering with Momentous, we hope that it means you are growing in your faith and noticing God's presence with you. And we hope that the moments where you are noticing God's presence are becoming more certain or more frequent or both. If you want to support the ministry of Momentous, engaging with us online is one way to do so. If you are able to give financially, you can visit our website and use the donate link there. Each one-time or recurring gift combines together to ensure the Momentous community continues to grow. We give thanks for every single one of you, for being a part of the Momentous community and for listening to God's call to try something new, and for beginning to notice God's presence even more frequently in your life, in our communities, and in our world. Until our next podcast, remember to breathe deeply and that God is present with you every single moment.